Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another installment of Client Side Chats. And as usual, we have a great guest with us today, Carla Silver. Hey, Carla, how are you?
Hey, James.
Good deal. So, hey, thanks for coming on here. By the way, for everybody who's listening in, tuning into this kind of thing, Carla Silver LLC. So, Carla is the managing member of her own company. Also, I know you and I met through ASSP, in fact, through Wyatt Bradbury. That was really a great introduction. And we've remained in contact ever since. In fact, we've done some things together, which,
Yes.
makes us clients of each other. And you're also an adjunct professor for the University of Alabama, Birmingham, correct?
Yes, definitely.
Cool, good deal. So I know we were talking a bit off camera here before we got going, but as you know, we like to focus on what are safety successes you may have experienced that you want to share, what's the issues, those kind of things. So have you thought of anything today for us, Carla?
Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit about sustainable safety.
Ah, okay, please go right ahead.
Well, the one thing, James, that I've recognized, and I will say this, I've got over 30 years. Yes, I'm that old. Over 30 years as a environmental health and safety professional. So with that, you know what? Safety always starts with management leadership. And you can't have that also unless you have effective employee participation.
Mhm.
So with top leadership is vital because it sets the organizational safety culture, and it has to be a continual improvement process to be successful. And without top management direction, it's going to fail.
Mm,
But today, more than ever, guess what? We need sustainable safety. And what I mean by sustainable safety, if we think about it, yes, safety is culture driven, but it
mhm.
needs to be sustained and not dependent on the change of the tides. So let me explain that a little bit further so you kind of get the picture, because
Definitely.
I have lived it. I have lived it. So I've seen the ups and downs and cycles within companies where management priorities change due to, guess what, your business needs. Companies don't exist without a business, and we've all got to make money. And a
Right.
lot of times that can mean meeting minimal safety compliance requirements. And that might be adequate. But here you're going to see where safety may be quick fixes, just enough to comply with
Mhm.
OSHA or whatever compliance directive that the company is following. I've seen, on the other hand, where safety is a top priority. And from the company's president all the way down to line management, safety is put on, guess what, the forefront. Resources, time, money, and people are quickly involved with the process. And
Mm,
that's what you want to see. That's what we would all like to see. But it can change just like the tide, just like a wave. It can go from one extreme to another. And I've
mm.
lived that as well. I've seen the downsides of companies, I've seen mergers, changes in management styles, changes with the priorities of what's going to be put on top. Is it production? Is it safety? Is it quality?
Mhm.
So I've also seen within a company where we have what we call the flavor of the day. And most of us
Mhm.
people that have been in safety understand what the flavor of the day is. Or we sometimes, some of us older people call it back to the future.
Yeah, we're not older, we're more experienced. That's
More,
all it is,
we're
right?
seasoned,
We're
we're
just
seasoned
seasoned, we're
professionals.
experienced. There we go. So please continue, Carla.
And this is where safety programs or initiatives are established, and they do hold a lot of value. I've lived through the majority of them.
Mhm.
And these are the ones I call the behavioral based safety programs, total team safety management, safety observation programs. These are put in place right when management thinks that there's a need or a
Mm,
change, or they want to beef up the safety within the site. And they hold a lot of value. But a lot of times these aren't sustained. They last about 5 years. They can run their course, they can fade out. And again, it all goes back to, guess what? A shift in priorities. Money, change in management, change in anything. Where management, one director may saw value in it, another may not. A new safety director comes in place, they want to try
mhm,
a different program. Not saying
mhm.
that the other program didn't hold value, but now we have another program in place. And guess what? It's not sustained either, because now you have new employees that come in. How are they managed? How are they trained? How do they know the safety initiatives? especially if that top upper management doesn't see value or see, guess what, any return on the value of that program. So a lot of times these learned processes die out with change of people, change of parties, change of management. So here you may have this scenario within the same company over years and years and years. You have opposite ends of the safety spectrum. And
Hmm.
I have lived that. I have lived where upper top management puts safety right up there with quality and productivity, resources, time, money, everything went forward safety. I mean, it was just like safety overload. And it was a wonderful, flourishing time. Then
Uh-huh.
guess what? The business drivers dropped. Companies, something changed in the company financially. How can we reduce? How can we minimize everything and just get down to what is required, which is, guess what? Minimal OSHA compliance. It's extremely hard when you start looking at success. How can I build in safety into a process that's not dependent on the culture or the program? And I want you to think about that for a minute.
Hmm. That's interesting.
How
Yeah.
can I do that? Because I'm here at the site. I'm here. I've been working. I've built all these great things in, and then I leave.
Yep.
What happens? And even myself as an adjunct professor at the University of Alabama, I work with students a lot when they come up with these great ideas about how they're going to tell their employees or build in this or build in that. And I said, well, how is it going to be sustained?
Hmm.
How is it going to continue after you left? And how, from a management of a change, is that process going to move forward with the tides?
Right.
So, this all starts with looking at your business and determining where safety can be designed into the process during the conceptual phase and then sustained by ensuring that the design, the template, or requirements are part of a process. So, for example, let me give you examples so you can kind of follow.
Okay, cool.
I worked in pharmaceuticals for at a company, major global pharmaceutical company, for over 34 years, primarily in the manufacturing and packaging arena.
Hmm.
I hate to say I kind of got known as the packaging queen, and I'll take that as a compliment, I guess, you know, because I kind of grew up in a man's world, and when you're sought out,
Uh,
that tells you that at least people listen and understand that you're adding value to the operation. The one reason I got that was because I was once in supervision over the finished goods and sterile fill productions at this pharmaceutical company. And there, I actually learned the operation. I
mm,
learned how to run production lines. I learned how to tear it down, put it back together, clean it, troubleshoot it. I pretty much knew it. Then turn around, I came into environmental health and safety.
mhm.
I understood now a different area, understood that safety had to be built into the operation. What I realized from a safety perspective was that there was an expectation really quick that equipment, especially we'll talk about the equipment, the integrator, the manufacturer of the equipment, and then the installer of my equipment that was going to be put out in that operation,
Mhm.
that they were going to comply, that they were going to build in whatever the standards that were for that piece of equipment.
Gotcha.
And also that I soon realized that number one, that the project engineer
Mhm.
or the industrial engineer, he in writing up that purchase order would actually use these coin words of comply with necessary safety standards. Although he really never knew what those safety standards were. It was
Right.
usually apply with applicable safety standards. He assumed that, guess what? That vendor would comply with applicable standards, correct?
Right. Right.
And then the equipment would be installed. And then the safety person who knows just enough about a little bit about everything, but not enough, because we can't know it all, not unless
Right.
you're an expert in that area or that arena. And generally it's a general safety person that's sent out to that production line, and they've got a checklist to check off, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And they're, even though they're checking it off, they know just enough that to check the box if something e-stop works or start button works or that type of thing. But they assume that the manufacturer and the integrator have built in safety, that that project engineer also understood the safety requirements because guess what? They wrote the purchase order for that piece of equipment and that everything was up to snuff until guess what? Until an incident occurs.
Mm,
And then when an incident occurs, everybody kind of steps back and scratches their head and goes, how did that occur? Well, then the next thing they do is they go back and do a root cause analysis to figure out what failed on that piece of equipment. So then they realize what failed and they fix that failure. And
right.
it could be anything, but they fix that failure on that piece of equipment. Now, is it sustained? Because guess what? That piece of equipment is not only at that site, but it could be at several of their sites,
Right.
or it could be on different production lines. And it's assumed that because we fixed it, and we might have gone across all those production lines that had that same piece of equipment, but then there could be something else which is inherent to a lot of production equipment is the way they function. A lot of the safety devices and control systems are similar or the same on different types of equipment, especially in production packaging pieces of equipment,
Right.
like interlock doors or reset buttons or any of those types of light curtains or different types of control mechanisms or pretty not saying pretty much the same, but it's dependent on the functionality of the piece of equipment.
Right.
But you assume that, we fix this one, we fix that one, we're all good. But then guess what? 10 years
Uh-oh.
later, you have the same failure. How did that occur? How did we not sustain? How did we not ensure that we didn't have this same issue? Because I've been there and I've scratched my head. And said, didn't this happen 7, 8 years ago? Didn't we have something similar on a different piece of equipment?
Hmm.
It might have been a different piece of equipment, but didn't something like this happen where the door didn't work properly or the door was open, the guy went to stick his hands in to do whatever, and somebody upstream hit a button and downstream all of a sudden it started operating, but the door was open and a
Hmm.
lock device failed. How could that have occurred?